The glass bottle gleamed like an emerald jewel against the wet sand, catching the morning sunlight at just the right angle to capture her attention. The woman paused her beach walk, 36 years of life having taught her that unexpected discoveries often carried unexpected meanings. As she lifted the bottle from the foamy surf, she noticed the rolled paper inside, preserved against the elements by a tightly sealed cork. Little did she know that the simple message inside, just 2 words long, would unravel a story of survival, connection, and gratitude that had been waiting over a decade to be found. The coastal research station where the woman worked sat perched on the edge of the small peninsula, its weathered wooden buildings a testament to the harsh conditions of life by the sea. For 8 years, she had lived in this remote location, studying marine ecosystems and the increasingly visible effects of climate change on coastal habitats. The isolation suited her, the rhythm of tides and seasons providing a structure that human interactions often lacked. Her colleagues respected her work and gave her the space she needed, understanding that her occasional solitary beach walks were essential to her well-being. This particular morning had drawn her out earlier than usual. A storm had passed through overnight, pushing waves higher up the beach than typical and depositing a fresh collection of shells, driftwood, and human debris. As a scientist, she found these post-storm treasures useful for her research on ocean currents and pollution patterns. As a human being, she found beauty in how the ocean transformed ordinary objects into artifacts of mystery and wonder. The bottle had caught her eye immediately, its deep green glass unmistakably old and hand-blown, not the mass-produced kind that usually washed ashore. A vintage wine bottle, perhaps, but one that had traveled far based on the weathering patterns. She had seen her share of messages in bottles before, most containing childish notes or vacation memories, but something about this one felt different. The careful sealing of the cork, the quality of the paper visible through the glass, all suggested intention rather than whimsy. Back at her cabin, she carefully extracted the message, using the specialized tools she normally reserved for delicate specimens. The paper was high-quality parchment, preserved remarkably well considering its journey. As she unrolled it, she was surprised by its brevity. Just 2 words, written in steady black ink, "Thank you." No signature, no date, no explanation. Just gratitude, context unknown, sender anonymous. Most people would have been disappointed by such a minimal message after the anticipation of the discovery. But the woman was a scientist, trained to see patterns and connections where others might see randomness. She turned the paper over, held it to the light, looked for any hidden markings. Nothing. Then she examined the bottle more carefully, running her fingers along its surface, feeling for any irregularities. Her fingertips detected something just beneath the rim, a small geometric pattern etched into the glass. Not a commercial brand marking, but something deliberately carved. The pattern was simple, a triangle with a small circle in its center. She photographed it, then brought it to the research station's small library where they kept reference materials on local maritime history. After several hours of research, she found a match. The symbol belonged to a glass factory that had operated in the coastal region nearly 200 miles north, one that had closed its doors in the late 1990s. The bottle was at least 25 years old, possibly older. The discovery only deepened the mystery. Not only was the message cryptic, but the bottle itself was antiquated. She found herself distracted during dinner that evening, her mind turning over possibilities. Who was thanking whom, and for what? Why send such a brief message with no context? And why go to such lengths to preserve it in a bottle that would likely never reach its intended recipient? That night, unable to sleep, she logged into the research station's database and began searching for historical references to messages in bottles found along their stretch of coastline. To her surprise, there were several documented cases in the station's records, most from the past 2 decades. She downloaded the reports and began reading through them. 5 hours later, As dawn approached, she sat back in her chair, a pattern emerging before her eyes. There had been 7 bottles found in the past 15 years, all with eerily similar characteristics: vintage bottles, high-quality paper, brief messages of gratitude. For simply said thank you, one said forever grateful, another you saved us, and the last, found just 2 years ago, never forgotten. None of the previous finders had connected the bottles to each other, each discovery treated as an isolated curiosity rather than part of a pattern. The woman checked the coordinates where each bottle had been found, plotting them on a map of the coastline. They formed a surprisingly consistent pattern, all washing ashore within a 30-mile radius, suggesting they had been deposited in the ocean at different times but from roughly the same location. That morning, she presented her findings to the station director, a veteran marine scientist in her 60s who had been at the station longer than anyone else. 7 bottles over 15 years, all with gratitude messages, all found in the same general area, the woman explained, spreading her evidence across the director's desk. This isn't random. Someone has been sending these bottles consistently, over a long period of time. The director studied the evidence thoughtfully. Fascinating pattern. But without more context, it remains just a curiosity. What do you suggest we do with this information? I want to find the source, the woman replied. Based on the ocean currents and distribution pattern, these bottles are likely coming from somewhere offshore, perhaps near the shipping lanes. If we can determine the most probable origin point, we might be able to understand the story behind them. The director raised an eyebrow. That sounds more like detective work than marine biology, but I suppose it could make an interesting side project. Just don't let it distract from your primary research. With permission granted, the woman spent the next week consulting with the station's oceanographer, using computer models to calculate probable points of origin based on the discovery locations and known current patterns. The analysis pointed to an area approximately 40 miles offshore, near a small, uninhabited island that was little more than a rocky outcrop. The island was known to mariners primarily as a navigation hazard, appearing on charts but rarely visited. There's nothing out there, the oceanographer said, pointing to the island on the navigation chart. Just rocks and birds. Occasionally sea lions during breeding season. There has to be more to it, the woman insisted. These bottles didn't materialize from nowhere. Someone has been sending them, consistently, for years. The opportunity to investigate came sooner than expected. 2 days later, the research vessel was scheduled to take water and sediment samples in the vicinity of the island as part of an ongoing study. The woman secured permission to join the expedition, ostensibly to collect data for her own research but with the private agenda of investigating the mysterious island. The journey out to sea was rough, with choppy waves making the small research vessel pitch uncomfortably. Despite having lived by the ocean for years, the woman found herself growing queasy as they approached the island. From a distance, it appeared just as uninspiring as described, a dark smudge of rock against the horizon, devoid of vegetation or obvious signs of life. As they drew closer, however, details emerged that caught her attention. On the leeward side of the island, somewhat protected from the prevailing winds, stood what appeared to be a small structure. Not a natural formation, but something constructed. Definitely human-made. Can we get closer to that side of the island? She asked the captain. I can circle around, but we can't get too close. The waters are treacherous with hidden rocks. As they carefully navigated around the island, the structure came into clearer view. It was a small cabin, weathered by the elements but unmistakably maintained. Solar panels glinted on its roof, and a small dock extended from a natural inlet. Someone lives out here? The woman asked, incredulous. Not officially, the captain replied. This island isn't part of any jurisdiction I know of. Too small, too remote. But yes, it appears someone has made a home here. As they circled, a figure emerged from the cabin, apparently alerted to their presence by the sound of the boat's engine. An elderly man stood watching them, one hand shielding his eyes from the sun. After a moment's hesitation, he raised his other arm in greeting. The woman felt her heart rate quicken. Could this be the sender of the bottles? The captain, seeing the man's greeting, cautiously approached the dock as closely as safety would allow. "Permission to come aboard?" the elderly man called out, his voice strong despite his apparent age. The captain looked to the lead scientist, who nodded agreement. Soon, their unexpected guest was climbing aboard with surprising agility for a man who appeared to be in his 70s. His weathered face suggested a lifetime of sun and wind exposure, but his eyes were sharp and alert. He wore simple, practical clothing, well-worn but clean. "Visitors are rare out here," he said by way of greeting. "What brings a research vessel to my little corner of the ocean?" The lead scientist explained their water sampling mission, which the elderly man listened to with apparent interest, asking surprisingly knowledgeable questions about their methodology and equipment. The woman observed him carefully, noting the bottle of water he carried, hand-blown glass not unlike the one she had found on the beach. When there was a pause in the conversation, she stepped forward, introducing herself and her specialty in marine ecosystems. Then, taking a chance, she produced the green bottle from her bag. "I found this washed up on shore last week," she said, watching his reaction carefully. "I was wondering if you might know anything about it." The elderly man's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of recognition quickly masked. He took the bottle with careful hands, examining it closely before handing it back. "An interesting find," he said noncommittally. "The ocean brings many surprises to shore." Including messages of gratitude, she pressed gently. A long pause followed as the elderly man studied her face. The research team had grown quiet, sensing the sudden tension in the air. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation on the island," he suggested. "I don't get many opportunities to entertain guests, but I can offer hot tea and a story that's been waiting many years to be told." The lead scientist agreed to continue their sampling work and return in 3 hours, leaving the woman to accompany the elderly man back to his island. As they approached the small dock in the research vessel's auxiliary boat, she noticed details that had been invisible from a distance. The cabin, though simple, showed signs of careful maintenance. A small garden grew in containers protected from salt spray, and a sophisticated rainwater collection system fed into storage tanks. This was no temporary shelter but a home built to last. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly comfortable, its single room divided into functional areas for sleeping, cooking, and what appeared to be a workshop filled with glass-blowing equipment. Shelves lined the walls, holding books, scientific journals, and rows of hand-blown bottles in various stages of completion. "You make the bottles yourself," the woman said, understanding dawning. "A hobby that became a purpose," the elderly man replied, setting a kettle to boil on a small propane stove. "Please, sit." As he prepared tea, he began his story, his voice taking on the rhythm of a tale told many times, if only to himself. 32 years ago, I was the captain of a small commercial fishing vessel. We were a crew of just 5, working the waters not far from here. A storm hit suddenly, more fierce than anything the forecasts had predicted. We received a distress call from a pleasure craft, a family of 4 on vacation, caught in the same storm and taking on water fast. He paused to pour the tea, his hands steady despite the weight of memory. We were the closest vessel, but conditions were deteriorating rapidly. My first mate argued against attempting a rescue, said it was too dangerous, that we'd be risking 5 lives to save 4 strangers. But I couldn't live with myself if we didn't try. The woman sipped her tea, letting him tell the story at his own pace. We found them just in time. Their boat was nearly submerged, The family clinging to the wheelhouse, the children, a boy and girl, terrified beyond words. The rescue was harrowing. Waves higher than our mast, winds that threatened to capsize us with every gust. But we got them aboard, all 4 of them. His eyes took on a distant look, seeing something far beyond the cabin walls. But our ordeal wasn't over. The storm had damaged our communications equipment and navigation systems. We were adrift, our engines struggling, with no way to call for help. For 4 days we fought to stay afloat, rationing water and food, keeping the children's spirits up with stories and simple games. Finally, the storm passed, and we managed to limp back to port. He gestured toward a faded photograph on the wall that the woman hadn't noticed before, showing a much younger version of himself standing proudly beside a fishing vessel. The family was grateful, of course. They tried to reward us financially, but that didn't feel right. We'd done what any decent people would do. They went back to their lives, we to ours. But something had changed for me. The experience shifted something fundamental in how I viewed my place in the world. He stood and walked to the workshop area, picking up a bottle similar to the one she had found. 3 years later, an accident took my leg, he continued, tapping his left leg, which she now realized was prosthetic. I couldn't captain a vessel anymore, couldn't stand the pitying looks from my former crew. I withdrew from the world, angry and bitter at the loss of the only life I had known. Setting the bottle down, he returned to his seat. Then one day, a package arrived. Inside was a handmade card, clearly crafted by a child, now older. It was from the girl we had rescued. She had tracked me down through mutual acquaintances in the fishing community. The card was simple, just a drawing of our boat and the words, "Thank you for my life." She explained that she was studying marine biology because of what happened, that our rescue had given her not just survival but purpose. The woman felt her throat tighten, beginning to understand where this story was heading. That card saved me from my despair. It reminded me that our actions ripple outward in ways we can never fully know. I realized I needed purpose again, but I couldn't return to my old life. So I found this island, unclaimed, forgotten, perfect for someone who wanted both solitude and connection to the sea. He smiled, gesturing to the bottles that surrounded them. I taught myself glassblowing from books, using materials I salvaged and equipment I built myself. And each year, on the anniversary of that rescue, I send out a bottle with a message of gratitude. Not to anyone specific, but to the universe that allowed me to be in the right place at the right time, that gave me the courage to act despite the danger. A reminder that gratitude, like those bottles, can journey far beyond our sight, carrying meaning we never witness. The woman sat in silence, absorbing his story. After a moment, she pulled out her notes about the other bottles that had been found. "There have been 7 bottles documented before mine," she said. "All found along the same stretch of coastline." The elderly man nodded. "Those are just the ones that were reported. I've sent one every year for 28 years now. Most are never found, or if found, never documented. That's not the point. The sending is what matters." "And the bottles themselves?" she asked. "Why go to such trouble to create them by hand?" "The message deserves a worthy vessel," he replied simply. "Mass-produced containers for mass-produced sentiments. Handcrafted bottles for authentic gratitude." As their conversation continued, the woman found herself sharing her own story, how she had come to the research station seeking solitude after personal disappointments, how the rhythm of the sea had gradually healed something broken inside her. The elderly man listened with the same attention he had given to his glassblowing, present and engaged. Before she knew it, the 3 hours had passed, and the research vessel was returning to collect her. As she prepared to leave, the elderly man presented her with a small, perfectly formed blue glass bottle, empty of any message. "For your own journey," he said. Some discoveries deserve to be commemorated. Back on the mainland, the woman found herself transformed by the encounter. She documented her findings thoroughly, creating a proper record of the bottle messages that could be added to the scientific literature on ocean currents and drift patterns. But she kept some details of the elderly man's story private, honoring the quiet dignity of his solitary life and annual ritual. 6 months later, during another post-storm beach walk, she found herself carrying the blue bottle he had given her. She had written her own message, not of gratitude but of intention, a promise to herself about the life she wanted to create. As she waded into the surf and placed the bottle into a receding wave, she thought about how connections form across time and space, how a simple act of rescue had created ripples that continued decades later, touching shores both physical and metaphorical. The bottle bobbed away on the current, catching the morning light like a sapphire, carrying her words to whoever might find them, or perhaps to no one at all. Either way, the sending itself was what mattered, the deliberate act of reaching outward from her solitude, a blue glass echo of the green bottle that had changed her understanding of gratitude and connection. Years later, she would establish a small museum exhibit at the research station, documenting the phenomenon of the gratitude bottles and their origin. Visitors were captivated by the story, often leaving with a renewed appreciation for the invisible connections that bind strangers across time and space. And each year, on the anniversary of her discovery of that first green bottle, she would walk the beach at dawn, scanning the surf for messages from a grateful heart living on a rocky island far from shore, sending out his annual reminder that sometimes the most profound thank you is one that asks nothing in return. This is the end of this video. Make sure to subscribe, and for similar stories, you should watch this video. Thank you.